I will speak more from the perspective of meta skills because if most of us
Every
can
HR should have these skills.
Yes, I'll
Skill, yeah. That's very important for organization growth, right? Culture. What do you take on this?
rightly brought out. Culture is a very important element of any organization.
Especially HR is very important,
Yes.
because HR people going to get that kind of culture in the organization.
Yes.
And that's what company is going to grow in a different level. And if you ask me, first is culture, then later anything else in the organization. Hello everyone, welcome back to the episode, the Leaders Speak podcast. Today we have a guest, Achala Bhatt, who's an HR leader and she has more than 12 years experience in HR and she led the teams and she's worked more than 5 MNC large company as well as starting growth of the organization. She has several accolades on her name, research paper and one white paper on her name. She is a keynote speaker, various education institutes from last 3 years, and she addressed more than 1,000 students. Apart from work, she is a public speaker more than 10 years, and she was a champion in improv speech in year 2021. Conferred by the Toastmaster International across 7 cities and 5+K participation. She was also adjudged the future L&D leader by Economic Times HR World in 2023. Let's welcome Achala Bhatt. Hi, welcome to the episode, the Leaders podcast. I would like to start with to know about your personal life, where you born, your childhood, your family background. Could you go ahead?
Sure. So I was born in a hamlet in coastal Karnataka, and but that's not where I grew up. I grew up in 2 different parts of India. One in Indore in Madhya Pradesh, and the second half of my childhood in Solapur in Maharashtra. So very 2 distinct cultures, and each of them truly taught me about varied culture. And of course, at home we used to practice the coastal Karnataka culture and so on. And this sort of continued. So as we were growing up, I think one thing that remained constant always was that my father's a scientist, and he's someone who really worked very hard to be who he is in his career. And he instilled us with the values of excellence, with resilience, courage, of strength, and always trying to aim higher and be disciplined about life. So he's that dad who you will always see in the memes, someone who reaches 15 minutes early. I think for him it's 30 minutes early, really. Oh. So that's how we grew up. And it didn't stop there. I kept on moving cities. I did my engineering in this place known as Belgaum in Karnataka, and again, a very different place and a very lovely city to study at.
I know.
And I did my MBA in Manipal with TAPI Management Institute, and again, a very beautiful city to be in. It did not stop there also. I also worked in multiple cities in India, in Trivandrum in Kerala, Chennai, then Hyderabad, briefly in Delhi also, and Mangalore, again a very beautiful city, and finally I'm in Bangalore. But if you look at the number of cities I have lived in and been through, it's a lot. And that really taught me about how varied perspectives exist in life, how welcoming people can be, and that you can build a home anywhere if you really open up yourself to really connect with people, to understand the culture and make yourself feel home.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you have multiple cities, right? And definitely when you travel so many different cities, you're going to learn a lot of things, different cultures you're going to learn. Definitely, we're going to talk about that. And my things like one of my favorite question whenever in podcast, every person has a different story to talk about when they choose the particular profession. And I want to ask you that why HR? Why not anything else?
Yeah. So it will start like a cliche, but it's not really a cliche. Let me give that disclaimer right away. So I'm an engineer, a software engineer, and I was a really good software engineer. I worked for 2 years as a software engineer. But when I was working for those 2 years as a software engineer, I felt I could do good in either marketing or HR because I felt I had the strengths to excel in either of these fields. And which is when I started preparing for my MBA entrance exam, and I eventually got into a premier institute with TAPME Manipal. And when I started pursuing my MBA, so the first year is always a common elective for everyone. We have common subjects for everyone, and we don't really choose what we major in. So in the first year is when I felt that my inclination towards HR was higher than my inclination towards marketing. And that's how I chose to pursue HR as the field that I would want to be in. And another thing, and which I would also encourage anyone to really reflect on while choosing their careers, is when you're working, it should feel like a flow. It should not feel like, okay, I need my salary. Okay, I need this job to keep myself engaged. It should feel like it's something which is natural to you. And I felt HR as a profession was giving me that.
Okay.
And that's where I felt I could go in HR as a profession. And of course, when I interned, my MBA internship, which was in the field of HR itself, it got furthermore affirmed. When I entered my first job as an HR, it got even more affirmed. And that's how I went on to build my career in HR. And a part of it, of course, a very cliche answer, which you do get to hear, is that HR professionals generally start with loving people. I think that, yes, of course, it's a part of the answer, but it also is crucial that you are very insightful, that you're very empathetic about things that are happening around you, and that you see patterns in data around you, that you see patterns in how macroeconomic changes are affecting people, how they can affect organizational growth. I think these factors are also important. And I felt that I had that knack to really join the dots and build the storyline, and which is why I did feel that I would be a good HR professional. And I think I've done a good job so far.
You're there more than 12 years, right? More than a decade now.
Actually, yeah, it's exactly 12 maybe, yeah.
Achha,
12 years.
okay. And as you mentioned that when you travel so many different cities for the education, and definitely there is a different kind of a culture you're going to face it. The same thing when come to organization, how do you feel, or what is the importance of culture in organization? Because definitely you're going to have a different kind of states people, maybe different languages. That's very important for organization growth, right? Culture. What do you take on this?
Yeah, I think rightly brought out, culture is a very important element of any organization.
Especially HR is very important, like
Yes.
because HR people are going to get that kind of culture in the organization.
Yes.
And that's what company is going to grow in a different level. And if you ask me, first is culture, then later anything else in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm lucky that I got the opportunity to really get a first-hand exposure to building culture in organizations. Largely as a part of my career, I've played roles in talent development. That's organization development, culture building, performance, or learning and development. And as you can see, these are very closely knit with culture, and also specifically culture building and employee value proposition building in particular is where my experience lies in. And when I was working on these projects, I did feel that while culture is very important, it's essential that as HR professionals, we understand different touch points the culture has with. And of course, when I started working on these projects, my belief was that, okay, I know everything about it. I know the touch points
Correct.
that exist in culture. But every time in these projects, my belief system was refreshed, because the more I dived deeper into it, more touch points emerged. And each of these touch points had their own challenges that they put forth for culture building. And that became a very interesting part of the work that I did. And that is where I felt that culture building is something which is very crucial and something organizations should really focus on, and dedicatedly have teams that would work actively on culture building, having for lack of better words, having those guidelines in place for culture building, ensuring that how the culture percolates across levels in an organization. All of these aspects are very essential. So rightly brought out. And yes, I think I've had the opportunity to be a part of these crucial projects.
Okay, that's great. Okay, as you mentioned, L&D, how much is important to any organization? Maybe it's like a startup or maybe mid-size or the big corporation. What is it just important of L&D in your organization? Like,
Yeah.
you want to I like want to talk about that one.
Sure. So, learning and development, and thankfully, as we move ahead in our in this at the juncture that we are in, learning and development has taken a increased prominence across organizations, and this comes with a very basic fact that all of us as humans really align to, which is we have to constantly keep on evolving. We we really became humans from the apes that we're in because of evolution, and upskilling is something which is in our DNA. Fortunately or unfortunately, various factors come into picture. It could be our day-to-day commitments, it could be our day-to-day deliverables, which usually act as impediment to our natural inclination to learn and grow. Learning and development as a profession, which is why always kept me exciting. One, because it's my personal motto and belief also is to continuously learn and grow. I always keep looking for learning new skills. Even so, there is never a full stop in my dictionary where anything stops, and which quite explains by the introduction itself. I've played 6 to 7 different roles in HR, and I still feel that I have not done enough. So learning is very natural to me, and it's a personal belief or a personal principle that I live by, and which is where I felt that if I venture into learning and development as a professional, I would be able to also do a much better job, because again, it aligns to my personal beliefs also. And coming to from an organization standpoint, I think learning and development always is a very pivotal team which keeps the organization on its toes and gives that reality check on to people, to the leaders, as to how ready we are to take on to the future. There are many other functions also, but learning and development really plays that role, which gives you that litmus test or that reality check of how ready we are. Do we have the right skills that can take us, that can keep us future ready? Do we have the right people with the right skill sets, combining both of them to take on to the future? All of these aspects come into learning and development. And also, while this is from a very umbrella perspective, just from a standpoint of explaining it to anyone in the audience and not necessarily HR professionals, it also is becoming a science where we are looking, HR professionals in specific, we are looking at learning and development as something which has to be tied into the skills that we want to develop. The pathway to develop those skills will be different for each of the skills. The resources that I might reach out to learn those skills will also be very different. Now, to do that, it is essential that the starting point of any journey in while learning a new skill is to really know which are those skills which are right for me, with a certain career development plan in mind. So as you can see, all of these things tying together and come under the gamut of talent development, which very beautifully brings in the codependency of all of these functions, and hence really it adds to the science of talent development, which is something I've always enjoyed doing. Now, another aspect to this is also about people really wanting to do it, that challenge which I was speaking of, right? Like people really having that natural inclination to learn and grow, but not being able to do so. That was also a very interesting problem I felt that I could do a good job at solving. And I would like to say I did a good job of solving it, because that's something genuine, that's something very authentic as a problem to people, and something I myself face. Now, I did say that I kept on learning and I do continuously learn, but this is a challenge all of us face. We want to do more. We want to really call out time to learn and grow. Me and you really made time to have this conversation. But to do that, there has to be that first step to be done. There has to be an enabling system in companies that has to come into picture. And that's where learning and development comes into picture, and which is what makes it very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's say, if when we talk about the big corporation or mid-sized industries, like normally they'll be having a L&D team, department-wide. I want to ask you that how, let's say, MSME or small-scale industry who have an employee of 10 or 20, 25 employees, how to start their L&D? Like, do you have any things to share with them? Because I know people want to have that L&D because they want to grow in their life. But, when a small team, like small size of 10 people, 20 people company, what are the basic things you can talk about that they can implement those things?
Yeah. So let us take a very worst case scenario in the sense that forget L&D team. The company may not even have the enough resources or budget to even have a single person who will do L&D. Let's take that scenario, or forget L&D, for that matter, human resources in specific. If, like you were mentioning, companies that have just 10 people in them. I think learning has to be inculcated as a culture, as a second nature to yourself. And even in big companies, we do try to inculcate that kind of a culture with people where there will be a team or there will be someone from L&D to guide you how to get to that juncture. But it has to come as a culture and a habit from you yourself. Now, and that is what will become crucial, especially for these smaller teams or smaller companies, where you have to ask yourself, how can I own my learning? It's a very, fortunately or unfortunately, I've seen a lot of professionals in my career who do feel that it is the responsibility of, say, a manager or someone else or an organization or an L&D team or someone else who has to nurture my career.
You mean to say it depends on the individual, not the business owner?
No, I'll elaborate this a little further. So, a lot of professionals have that belief, and while that is absolutely partly true in the sense that there will always be enabling teams to help you guide through that journey.
Sorry.
But that halfway of walking the halfway, or that ownership has to come from you yourself. And to build in that sense of ownership and owning your career and owning your learning is a trait these small companies could really look at inculcating. There will always, of course, be a leader in all these small companies. And that trait, if all these companies can look at inculcating in their professionals, I think that is a good L&D team of all those people themselves.
Okay, great. Acha, you mentioned it's very important to upskill your things, right? Definitely. As a HR, you would have done a lot of upskills yourself. As a salesperson, I'll definitely focus more on where I can upskill myself when it comes to sales and marketing.
Yeah.
And according to you, if you want to ask like top three as a HR profession, I know AI is one of the definitely, because that is everyone has to be that thought. Can just tell top three according to you that, okay, you need to focus on these area to upskill yourself to the audience, like
So,
as a HR profession, yeah.
you mean to say in the field of now with the advent of AI? I will speak more from the perspective of meta skills, because if most of us
Every
tend
HR
to-
should have these skills.
yes,
Skills, yeah.
so which is what I'll speak from a perspective of meta skills really. And to take a step back, I'll elaborate what meta skills are as well. Meta skills are those skills which help you learn other skills. Now, exactly the names of the skills, all of us can find it out. You have Google, you have ChatGPT. With the advent of AI, you'll get straight answers. But for me to really learn those skills, I need to have meta skills. And that is something I would like to share with the audience and HR professionals. And this is something also scalable to everyone really outside also. One is curiosity. Always be curious about how things happen, how they work. Why is everyone posting about Gen AI on LinkedIn? Or why has Gen AI suddenly taken dominance? And of late, I must admit, I don't see as many Gen AI posts as much as I used to see last year. So has something else come up? But this can happen only when you're curious about things. So curiosity is one, absolutely. Second one I would definitely speak of is learning agility. And learning agility is a very deep concept. And in fact, I've taken a lot of webinars and sessions which speak specifically of different types of learning agility. But to put it in a nutshell, having that cognitive ability to be agile to learn different aspects. And I'll give my example myself. I ventured into employer branding as a role, which comes in with a bit of a mixture of marketing as well as branding, while the academia that I've pursued or the career journey that I've followed is hardcore HR. But by bringing in that learning agility, by really knowing that there is someone out there who can help you learn that skill, and to expand my mind, knowing that, hey, I don't know everything about this field and I have to learn more. That learning agility can help you build that skill also. So curiosity, learning agility. And the third one I would say for HR professionals in specific is also persuasion. As HR professionals, I think and I'm sure everyone in the audience who would be listening to this video will agree to it, that most of our requests will get questioned. Or I was possibly using a bit of a subtle word, they could possibly get shot down. But you have to develop that consultative ability or that persuasion skill on how can you build a business case, on how can you build a strong merit to what you have to propose as an HR professional. I think these three skills will be very essential as meta skills for HR professionals.
Okay, great. Yeah, as you told, these are skills very important to start with any HR people. They can upskill those things. Yeah. And I'll be reading a lot of things nowadays. There is a lot of layoff is happening, okay, in corporates, okay. What is the reason for that? Like, I just going through in the morning, one of my social media, they told if between the age of 40 to 45, and people are sacking more on those, because according to corporate, they feel these are payroll cholesterol. That's what, because you want to be in the game, either you need to have a different kind of income sources, like anything, you should build that kind of portfolio, and you should have a skills that going to help you to build your own business. That's what the important. I'm just taking this one.
Yeah.
According to what is the reason for that? Like, there's a lot of happening nowadays, especially in corporates.
Yeah. And while every company would have their own reasons for layoff, it could be business restructuring or it could be multiple other reasons, and the nuance for it could get very diverse really. But without getting a lot into detail, I'll tie it back to what we have been conversing so far. That is to keep continuously upskilling yourself and to stay curious. A lot of times, and this is roughly 10 years back when I started venturing into HR, I used to hear a lot of times from the other HR professionals around me that, hey, I'm not good at Excel, but I can be a good HR professional. I'm good with people. And I absolutely, yes, would respectfully disagree to that statement, because like I was mentioning in my first answer itself, data insight, deriving insights, intelligent insights out of data or any observations that you have specifically data is a very core skill that is required for HR professionals. So just banking onto this example itself, if you have that resistance that I don't need to learn this skill because, hey, I think this skill is important for my job. Or, hey, I don't think I have this skill, but this skill, I need not learn it. But everyone is learning it. So that mindset is something all of us have to really overcome. It is not you versus that skill. It is you versus you trying to stay relevant. So, which is where at a certain age or at a certain career juncture, you might hit a place where all the skills that you know are possibly replaceable by AI. But can you still, if you keep continuously upskilling yourself, if you keep continuously growing and evolving as a person, that is something which will not affect you. There are other macroeconomic conditions which are beyond our control any which ways. But what is in our control is really to keep continuously evolving as professionals.
Are you sure that only because of the skills they don't upskilling themselves? That's what the reason for that layoff is happening, or there's something other reason also?
Because it's happened in other companies, I'll reserve my thoughts there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And as you told, like you were started with some marketing activities, right? Then you moved to HR, and you mentioned one of the things, employee branding, like a couple of things.
Yeah.
Can you just help me to understand, like, what do you mean by employee branding and onboarding in corporates? Like?
Yeah. So onboarding is a different gamut and employer branding is a different game altogether. I'll pick on to employer branding because that's what I emphasized in one of my previous answers. Employer branding is really, is for lack of better words, promoting or standing by the brand that your company lives by and communicating it effectively to people outside your company, effectively enough for them to want to be a part of your company, and also internally for people who are already inside your company to feel that sense of pride in associating with the company. So both of these things combined in together is employer branding. And I gave a very elaborate and simplistic answer and not a very textbook one for the simplicity of understanding really. So that is what employer branding stands at. And as we have, at this juncture currently in 2025 as we speak, it has risen to a lot of prominence, and a lot of companies are investing in building their employer branding because we are in a very cutthroat market. We are in an industry where it really is, it has never been so competitive, especially in the Indian industry gamut of things. And when there is such fierce competition, you have to stand out as an employer to people outside. So just for the sake of stats, the number of Gen Z people in India is equal to the population of United States. And that's the amount of talent we are speaking of. And from this population, from this humongous population, if you want to attract the best of them, you got to have your pitch right as an employer. You got to have that employer branding strategy right for people to really be wanting to work in your company in this competitive space. So that's where employer branding comes in. And it's a very interesting game because when you're a part of the company, you have chosen that company because, of course, you associate with it for some reason. You did like some benefits or some things that the company is offering. How do you communicate it to the people outside? And as simple as sounds, as difficult as it gets, it has a lot of layers into it. And even to the people internally. Again, these are the people who had really chosen the company because the company they were, because they did associate or like something in the company that it was offering to them. Still, how do you instill that sense of pride in them? It becomes a very challenging problem to solve, and that's what I did enjoy doing.
But that's going to help them to build their personal brand also with the social media.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rightly brought out. Building your personal branding, it's very individually driven, but that's a very small subset of employer branding.
You're the best example for that.
Thank you.
Okay, and then you're talking about onboarding process, right?
Yes, yeah. So onboarding is another role that I did get an opportunity to play earlier, and it also has a very good touch point with employer branding, and somehow
It's very, very important, right? Onboarding for the new employee.
yes.
How are you going to treat him? How are you going to give that kind of experience?
Yeah.
It's very important. Right?
Yeah. So it goes with the old adage that is, first impression is the last impression. And even if I were to build on to that, I think what onboarding programs should really inculcate in people or include in themselves is a sense of belongingness. You are entering, an employee enters a new company. They've possibly, for freshers, this is their first corporate stint. They are starting with it. And for experienced people, they are possibly leaving another corporate landscape to enter into this company. Now, the first thought that comes into both of these cohort of people is, I want to feel belonged where I go. This will be a place where I'll be spending my 9 to 10 hours of my every single day on a weekday. I have to feel belonged there. Of course, what happens later is really a journey that both the organization and the employee travel together. But in those first 2 days, you have to build a pitch about your company and also inculcate through sessions and other interventions that, yes, this is a place where I will feel belonged. Because as human beings and as we move in our journeys, social health is coming to prominence, especially in big cities like Bangalore. Social health is a big concern. And with all of these coming to prominence, I think onboarding is a very good tool to build in that sense of belongingness in people.
Yeah, that's very important for an employer, right? Yeah. I know you've done a lot of panelists in different events, and some of the events are your keynote speaker. And especially when it's come to Gen Z, what your take on, like, how should they develop their career growth? Like, there is a lot of things happening, in the world that Gen Z is like different kind of attitude, different kind of people. But how you would develop them, like?
Yeah. I think one very good thing about Gen Z, what I've seen across the panel discussions that I've been in or keynote speeches, or even the people I personally coach, what
So you
I've
coach
noticed
personally for the Gen Z?
Yes.
Okay.
And
On what, like, it's more into soft
whatever-
skill or
so I'm
behavioral pattern? What?
I'm associated with a company known as Pivot, where I do coach people across a gamut of things. And it's not just Gen Zs, though coincidentally, most of my mentees are Gen Z. It's across the age group really who want to build their careers. Anything from career growth to building careers in HR is what I coach them in. But to answer your question, for Gen Zs in specific, one very good thing that I've seen in them is that everyone has reasonably good clarity about what they want. Whenever I have asked them as to what is your aspiration, I had to make very minimal effort in making them know that what could they really pursue in their career. A lot of times the answers have come in from that side. So thankfully it could be possibly the access to the resources that they had while growing up. Everyone has reasonably good clarity, and somewhere that fine tuning is where I have come into picture. Which brings me to the next point as to what they should keep in mind while pursuing their careers or while choosing their careers for themselves is, one, always keep in mind that a career is a very long short game. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So currently what looks lucrative, definitely, I'm sure it is lucrative, but bring in a lens of also the fact as to how it is going to add to your career journey. What pivotal moment or what specifically will it add to your career journey, which is a long marathon really of possibly 30, 40 years or even 20 years if there are people who want to retire when they're 40 also. But even then, it's a long time. 20 years is also still a very long time. Bring in that lens also as to how pivotal can this decision of yours or this organization or this role will add to your career journey. That is one. And second aspect is to always have another part in your life, which or another side to you in life, which you really enjoy doing. I think as Gen Zs, or this is something across generations, we put overemphasis on our professions, and I really feel bad for the companies or the professions that give us the jobs, because yes, it is a tool where you can grow as a professional. Yes, it is a place where you earn and that pays your bills and everything, but it still cannot really fulfill many of the other needs that you might have as an individual. For example, if you have a passion, yes, there are companies that have hobby clubs and passion clubs, and even companies, more and more companies are going into that foray. But still, pursue something outside of your profession also passionately, because that will bring in a very different flavor to your persona, and you will not be completely over-dependent on your profession to fulfill that creative need of yours. Maybe your job doesn't require you to be very creative, but it's still helping you build a career. It is still helping you build a lot of things as a profession. So then pursue something which will give that foray to your creativity. And that's something I've also done personally in my life. I've been into public speaking throughout my life, yes, but also specifically in Toastmasters. I've been for the last 12 years across India as well as with East USA. And pursue something more. So I do write poetry and perform across various stages in India and multiple other things as well. So just giving my example, do have something beyond your profession also that defines you. I think that's something I would want to share with all the Gen Zs. Whether it pays you or whether it does not pay you is a very different second question, and maybe we'll record another podcast or a conversation for that. But do something beyond your profession also. I think and I'll also bring in a third aspect over here. Have a mentor in your life. All of us, yes, now again, it's not like 10 years back when I began my career where there was no ChatGPT and there was no, yes, Google search was there, but that's really where it stopped. Always have a mentor in your life, because a ChatGPT or a Google search will reply basis what you key into that. But a mentor will be able to really personally guide you. A mentor will take your journey also as a personal.
Actually, mentor, yeah.
Yes, and a mentor will take your journey also as his or her own personal journey, and will be able to guide you through that. Unlike a ChatGPT or a Google search, which is very much dependent on the keywords that you key into there. So that is something I would also like to share. And if you do have a mentor, again, one aspect of mentorship is also, and this is something I always share in all my coaching or mentorship sessions also, is that what you share as a feedback or what you share as a guidance is not doctor's prescription. You are still free to not follow it. But my guidance to the Gen Z would be like, have a mentor who you would, at least for the 70 to 80% times, 80% of the times you would want to align to what they share with you, because only then it's worth your time. Only then the association of mentor and a mentee would be successful. Yeah.
But how to identify a mentor? Like in initial career.
Good question. Very good question. And
Everyone talk about you should have a mentor.
Yeah,
But I face this kind of problem. When I started my career, that there is no mentor as such, because
Yeah.
what I learned from my boss only. But as a person, how do you identify the mentor?
Yeah, I think very valid question. And I was touchwood very lucky in initial days of my career, where somehow I could very easily find people who could be my mentors. But there were some filters I realized I was putting in my mind whenever I approached someone as mentors. So the first crucial thing is this: whoever you want to get mentored from has to inspire you in some way. And it's not that, oh, this person has gotten promotion every single year. Yes, that could also be one, but it could just be the career journey. The way they have built their career is something which should inspire you. The second aspect is also that as much as possible, you should see an overlap in the belief systems that you have. So most of my mentors have also been people who are very active professionally, but who are also very active in something else outside their professionals. They have been football players, they've been businessmen, they've had multiple business. What I mean to say is, my personal belief of doing something strongly beyond the work is also something that they also exemplified. So that's a match in personal beliefs, which is very essential. Only then you will really connect. You will love to have conversations with your mentor if you have that match. The third and a very crucial point, and I'm bringing this to the third point because this is something everyone, any which ways, follows while choosing their mentor, is they should be from a similar profession of yours. They should be in the similar academia that you're followed, or actually in the similar profession really. Even if, so for example, if someone wants to get coached on building, learning and development as a career, they would reach out to me because I've played that role for a large chunk of my career, though I don't play that role in my existing role, but I've played that sufficiently in my career. So that overlap has to be there. That person has to have some subject matter expertise in what you want to get mentored. Yeah, so these three aspects, if you follow, I think, while it's a very long answer, I think, but it will still simplify.
That's very important.
Finding a mentor.
There's a lot of people there, they don't know whom to choose mentor.
Yeah.
And they're definitely this kind of answers, they're going to help for these people.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about Gen Z, you mentioned clarity. They have so much of clarity.
Yeah.
That's very important for me because it's very, very important because when we started, especially when I started my career, I don't have a clarity in my life. Like I want to do just sales, but in sales, what to do next, like 5 years or 10 years, that time I had not had a clarity in my life. And this is given very, very important because Gen Z have a full clarity on what they want to achieve in this world. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
And when we talk about earlier employer branding, the personal branding go to hello, right? And for you, Achala, that now I know you are so much in LinkedIn. I go through the articles. There is a lot of you building your personal brand. According to you, how much this is important, like now present, and let's say before 5 years, like what is the difference now? Like I think you started just 3-5 years back to focus more on personal branding.
I've always been into personal branding throughout my life.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. But according to that, how much is important?
Yeah.
Like irrespective of any profession, maybe HR, marketing or operation, purchase or sales, anything, how much is important? What made you to focus on these areas and how it has impacted your career?
Very valid question. And at a right juncture, you've brought in this question also. I have, for some reason, and I may not be able to give an answer as to why particularly I've always focused on my own personal branding, but I've always really focused on my personal branding. Even before LinkedIn came into picture. LinkedIn is a very powerful tool to ensure your personal branding from a professional standpoint. But I've always really believed in personal branding because, again, especially in a country like India, we are a country of 2 billion. Right now, we are the most populous country on this planet with very talented people. We are a very highly skilled country in every aspect. How do I stand out? One is, of course, I should really know the skills that I'm telling I have. If I'm telling I'm an L&D professional, I've played that for a large chunk of my career, I should truly know it. One is that aspect, absolutely. But the second aspect is also to make people know that you're indeed good in it and why you're good in it and why you specifically stand out from everyone else around you when there are so many other L&D professionals in the industry and absolutely very highly skilled and absolutely very highly qualified. What is it that others should know about you which makes you stand out? And personal branding starts with a very basic principle, and it, as I'll say it very forthright, is to really be shameless. And a lot of people, specifically I coach on personal branding, keep asking me, and this is a standard question in all my coaching sessions on personal branding, is that I did this, but do you really think I should speak about this? Do you really think I should speak about this? And I'm like, hell yes, you should.
Should talk.
Everything that you do. And I'm not even speaking of things, which are very infinitesimal. People who have done phenomenal things in their life also ask me this question. People who are just starting and yet to do phenomenal things also ask me this question. And which is where I tell that personal branding is shameless. You really have to speak of what is good in you, speak of what you're doing passionately, speak of where you want to go, because someone out there will listen to it, and for all you know, it will get your job done. And by job, it could be anything. It could be finding a job, like really finding a job. It could be finding a mentor. It could be finding a mentee, which has also happened with me. Both have happened with me. Finding a mentor, mentee, both have happened with me, although personal branding. Or it could even be finding an opportunity which you enjoy, like this conversation that we are having. And as you know, that this happened because you stumbled onto my LinkedIn profile and we got chatting about how we could bring this to fruition. So, which is why personal branding is important. And in today's era, coming to why specifically now it has risen to prominence in the last 4-5 years, is everything is branding these days. If I've learned a skill, it's branding. I'll brand about it. If I've done something, this conversation I've been a part of, I'll brand about it. Everyone has to know about it, that you have done it. And how you do it is really what is personal branding. And you have to be skillful at it. And if not skillful, at least start the way, and eventually you will become skillful. But that journey has to start somewhere. And again, with the advent of social media and the number of time everyone spends on the screen, this is what is very dominant. And I'm sure you come from a sales background. We are no longer people going door to door speaking about what we are selling. Everyone will look into the phone. Even if someone comes out to the door, they'll Google it and they'll first look for your authenticity. So bring in that prominence on personal branding on social media.
No, that's very important. Rightly, you mentioned that it not only sales, going to door to door. Yeah, it's happened so many times because when I meet new prospects, definitely they're going to check my LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
And that based on that, they feel, okay, this person has some value in the thing, what is creating the platform, what kind of, how much we're going to add value. That makes a huge difference in sales. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And you are expert in L&D, especially. You talk about a lot of L&D things. And I heard so many people talk about gamification in L&D. Can you just talk about how the gamification is going to help?
Yeah.
This is regular. Is it different from the traditional learning and development?
So gamification is really a concept which can be imbibed anywhere. It can be imbibed in onboarding. It can be imbibed in learning and development. It's really rewarding certain behaviors is gamification. And specifically in learning and development, it is very crucial and it can be helpful because it will try to solve that problem which we were earlier speaking of, where people want to learn, but they're not finding the incentive to learn and the time to learn or the willingness to learn. So if you gamify it, if you bring in rewards or if you tie to certain behavioral drivers that all of us have and would like to be rewarded on, then you are gamifying the whole journey. And what I've seen in organizations where I had gotten a chance to work on these projects is it runs very well. The adoption rate becomes very higher because now I'm rewarding certain human behaviors that are tied to learning and development. I think at the end of it, it's not tied to gamification or learning and development, but I want to really emphasize on one fact is, as HR professionals, all of us have to understand the human behavior very well. At the core of it, all of us still have not, with the, AI, robot, tomorrow some DI, EI, FI, whatever comes into picture, at the base of it, certain human behaviors don't change. We all want to grow as people. We all get preoccupied. We all have priority lists per se. We all operate basis priority lists. We all want to feel belonged. We all want to be cared for. So certain behaviors, human behaviors really never change across evolution stages, across countries or across races, everything. So we really have to be people or scientists, HR professionals have to be scientists of human behaviors and human psychology and try to build programs which will amplify or which will cater to these certain human psychology, by catering to those specific behaviors. So I think gamification does that to a certain extent very well, and which is why it works across organizations.
But that has increased the performance of the people.
It has helped achieve the objectives of the program.
Okay.
And yes, performance, if it's tied to specifically performance development, it has.
Okay, that's great. And you are more into fitness, okay? I know you focus more on when I discuss with you about the person things you talk about. One of the main area is like you focus more on fitness.
Yeah.
And how that going to help? Because as a profession, HR profession, definitely by doing every day consistently, and when you started this one, like how many years back, how that going to help as a profession? Because I know any work, especially HR people, have more stress in the organization because you need to handle people or you want to handle management. How that going to help you?
Yeah.
And you just talk about your fitness as when you started, how you started, how that going to help?
Yeah. So I'll first start with possibly how I got into fitness as a lifestyle. So I used to be a very obese teenager. I used to weigh close to a quintal, and obviously I was bullied everywhere, just like all the fat kids or fat teenagers gets teased on. And that is where I felt, and this is, I'm speaking of 2005, and I grew up in a very a small city, like I was mentioning, in a city like that. But then I had this thing like, okay, I can do better at how I look or how my fitness is. I can do better. It just started with that thought. And that is it. At the age of 15, I went and consulted a dietitian and who prescribed a particular diet for me to lose weight and also workouts that I could do. And all I did was I just religiously followed it without dropping a single day. And boom, I just lost 50 kgs at that point of time. And this is when I was 18-year-old. I still look back to that 18-year-old for the dedication she had. Not that it has dropped, but then still that's like a benchmark in my mind always. So that's how fitness began for me as a lifestyle. It began to lose my weight at that point of time, of course, but fitness is a lifestyle. It should be a very natural thing to you. It should be like brushing your teeth. Like if for example, if you lose your toothbrush one day, God forbid, you will actually go downstairs and look for another toothbrush and then actually make it happen, because you cannot live without it. That's a part of your life. Fitness has to become like that. It should be a part of your lifestyle. If you're traveling, unless you are really on a very long flight to the other side of the planet, which is to Canada or the States, where you are in a very, very long flight, I understand in a flight you cannot really find a place to work out. You can still find a way to work out otherwise if you're traveling. So that's how my philosophy is fitness as a lifestyle. I don't skip my workouts unless I'm physically sick. That's the cadence I follow. And it's not like every single day I work out at 100%. There are days I'm at 40, there are days I'm at 60, there are days I'm at 150. But consistency is my philosophy in fitness. Now, the second part of your question as to how it helps HR professionals or professionals in general.
Yeah.
So zooming that out a little bit, there's this one very common question I've always gotten. So now that I'm so much into fitness, every workplace that I've been in, I have been famous and infamous for being into fitness. All my managers, hands down, have known that I work out. And most of them would even know the timings I would go for my workout, because of course I had to communicate it to them that, hey, this is a time. If you call me, I may not be able to pick the phone. Please drop a text. So almost all my managers have known my gym timings always. So with that, I think one common question I've always gotten across organizations from people at work is, doesn't that tire you? Like, we work here so in our company the whole day with so much of stress. And after that or before that, how do you find the energy and why do you invest your energy in working out? And my answer to that is it's the other way around.
Yeah, correct.
If you work out, you will have the energy to really work the whole day, or vice versa. When you have worked the whole day, you will really, that is what will energize you for the rest of the day, vice versa. So that really is a core part, a mindset shift that we need to bring it into picture. The other things like, losing weight, looking good, or it brings in a certain, whatever health benefits of it, whatever mental benefits of it, and everything is definitely there. It's a byproduct of it. But that mindset shift has to come that workout or fitness is a lifestyle that you really follow. And just to add on to that, workouts in specific is something which secretes one of the happy hormones, that is endorphins. And it has happened a lot of times. And of course, now I'm saying so much that I'm so regular in workouts. Of course, even I have days where I'm like, this was such a difficult day. I absolutely cannot work out today. I will not bring in another stressful factor in my life because this was a busy day. There have been days like that. But in all those days, I just made that 1-2 minutes of effort of walking to the gym. And after that, magically after an hour, I feel like, okay, it was a stressful day, but I think I can deal. It has come in naturally. It's not like the trainer did some magic or I did some magic. It's just that mindset shift comes in after the workout, because someone who practices fitness as a lifestyle like myself is an athlete. I may not be preparing to run a marathon or to go into Olympics because my full-time job is something different.
Okay.
But I'm still an athlete because I'm practicing every day.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, it's more than a consistency, it's a discipline. That's what makes a difference, right?
Yes.
When
yes.
you are disciplined to doing the workout,
Yeah.
definitely the result will be totally different. Because I also agree on that, because there's so many people are focusing fitness nowadays, because especially after the COVID 2020,
Yeah.
people priority change.
Yeah.
And especially myself, now the first priority is a fitness, definitely. Not like you as a everyday, but I'll make sure that weekly thrice I'll go to the workout. Like
Yeah.
I do a lot of things, and that will change my life, and I'll be more energetic, as you mentioned, whole day. Definitely, that's going to help a lot.
Yeah.
And
I'll just bring in that disclaimer, and thank you for bringing that out. Just because I said I work out every day, if you're starting, please do not do that. When I started, I also started with 2 days a week, I think.
that's it.
And in fact, I remember the first workout ever that I did when I was 15 was really go for a 45-minute of brisk walk.
Okay.
And coincidentally, I was in Bangalore at that time at my aunt's place. And my aunt's house really has 2 floors, like, a hall, and then you climb up 1 floor and you go to the TV area. I could not climb those stairs. I was sitting and going on those stairs because my body couldn't handle a 45-minute brisk walk. So that was my fitness level when I started. So please, just because I said I work out every day, kindly do not start with that. Start with, just like Basavaraj was mentioning, start with 2-3 days a week. Yes.
no, it's like, it's very important. May not be go to workout like gym or working out every day.
Movement.
Maybe, yeah, that's
Yes.
very important. Like,
Yes.
the Akshay Kumar, one of the fitness actor
Yeah.
in Bollywood, he mentioned if you're not giving 1 hour to yourself every day, that doesn't serve your purpose. Because
Absolutely.
body you need at
Very good, yeah.
minimum 1 hour to go. That's very important. Maybe you can go for, as you mentioned, you can go for walk.
Yeah.
Again, do some
Yeah.
play, like maybe playing football,
Yeah.
cricket, something you need 1 hour time for yourself. That's
Yeah.
very, very important. That's overall, as you mentioned, the body going to change and they're going to react very well. And
Yeah.
you'll feel so happy, good about yourself for the whole day.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. That 1 hour you have to give yourself. That's very
Absolutely. Yeah.
important. And my next thing is like, recently launched a book. Okay. I think just 15
Yeah.
days back, right?
Yeah.
What is the title of the book, or what made you to launch a book? And just thought I'd just check with you.
Yeah. So it's known as 111 Days of a Mountain Flower.
111 days.
Yes, 111 Days of a Mountain Flower. And it looks good on books. Like, when you're saying it looks 111, it's like 111 Days of a Mountain Flower. And it began where last year is when I started scripting the book. So just again, I'll take a step back and possibly go as to why a book. So ever since I was a child, everyone around me would tell me, you write so well, you should become a writer. You write so well, you should become a writer. But of course, that's not the first thing that comes to your mind. We are a country where we grew up looking at full-time jobs very differently. Writer may not be the first thing that came to our minds, but that stayed at the back of my mind somewhere that, oh yes, I can become a writer. And finally, last year is when I took it seriously. Okay, let me actually write it. But then it comes to the fact that what will I write about? What book will I write about? And I had co-published books earlier. My poems I had co-published with people, but not solo published.
Okay.
So now this was a time I would solo publish. And I thought of this topic because I lived in a very beautiful penthouse in Bangalore, and knowing Bangalore, it's especially the commercial areas, it's very difficult to get a penthouse.
Yeah.
And I somehow luckily got it. And because it's a penthouse, I named it Betta Hoo, which in Kannada means a mountain flower.
Yeah.
And also it happens to be the name of a very famous movie in the 1970s. So I just found that name very apt for it. And which is why Mountain Flower, 111 Days of a Mountain Flower. So I've documented 111 days of my life in that penthouse. And it's really the message of the book, and if not as strongly, what I wanted to convey from the book is that life happens to you daily. Every little thing or every mundane thing around you, everyday object around you, everything that you do daily is also your life. It's also significant. Everything has significance in your life. Life does not just happen when you get promoted or when you get married or, any of these major milestones which we have traditionally, of course it happens then. But I think, unfortunately, humanity has evolved to a place where they look at life that it happens only when these things happen, which is not true. It happens every single day. And that's what I wanted to bring out. And I wanted to bring it out by documenting my own 111 days, saying that, look, in these 111 days, of course, some days there were milestones. But majority of those days, they were not milestone. They were really mundane days. I did the same things. I went to office, I went to gym, I came back and had dinner and I slept. Maybe I just did that much, but that day was still significant. And why it was significant is what I've tried expressing in the book. So the genre is really the slice of life. And for people who watch Japanese manga or Korean dramas will know it. It's a slice of life is a theme where it does not involve any fighting, or it does not involve any twists and turns like Bollywood movies. It's very everyday thing. It's very simplistic form of theme of books. And there are very less books or even dramas or movies in that theme in India. And I wanted to start doing something about it. Yeah.
Okay. Where can they buy, collect?
Oh, yes. Good question. A very important question. Yeah. It's available on Amazon India, Amazon US, also on Flipkart and Amazon UK as well. And it's available in paperback, hard case and Kindle formats. All of it. And as we speak, if you Google for 111 Days of a Mountain Flower and my name, you will find the book in the first page itself. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But after this podcast, now, if your sales is increased, then the credit goes to me, okay?
Absolutely. We'll discuss the shares. Yes. Maybe.
Yeah. And you focusing on a personal brand, you launch a book, and you are thought leader, you are keynote speaker, you've done a lot of things. Let's say, what next? Achala. Where do you want to focus next? Let's say next 3 or 5 years, where do you want to focus? Maybe definitely even HR community only, but if you ask HR, where do you want to look for next 3 or 5 years?
Yeah. I would say, I think I'll answer the first part professionally. My next 4-5 years, I would want to be an HR leader who would be able to guide the agendas or lead the agenda for multiple functions in HR. Because now that I've played as an individual contributor or as function lead for smaller, for individual functions across companies, and I've gotten exposure, thankfully, across various multiple industries, I would want to be an HR leader who leads multiple functions and their agendas for the respective company. That's professionally, and which would eventually lead to becoming a chief human resource officer in the next couple of years, the next step to that. So that's what I'm working actively towards. And from the other standpoint, of course, I think I thoroughly enjoyed the process of writing my book and publishing it and promoting it. I would love to write another book. I don't have the topic in mind yet, but that idea is already there in my mind.
Wow.
I would love to be a TED speaker. In fact, I have 2-3 ideas in my mind ready. I'm just waiting to get a call to be a TED speaker at any forum because
So don't worry.
yeah, maybe after this podcast. I'll thank you in that as well. Maybe at the end of the TED speech, yeah. So that is also one of the aspirations because I have 1 or 2 topics in my mind already. And possibly go to perform at Spoken Fest or any of these large poetry festivals. I do perform at open mics. So from that front, possibly perform at any of those. But of course, aside of all these geeky things, I also have some, I'll just possibly share one personal goal, which is to travel to South Korea in specific because I'm a huge K-drama fan. And to a certain extent, I've learned Korean. I can manage my way out in the 1 week or the 10 days I would go there. So that's one personal goal that I also have.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And if someone want to be your mentor, like they want to mentor you, so they can reach you on thing like
Yes.
can reach on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, and I'm also available on this platform known as Pivot, Pivot. It's a fabulous platform, and I'm lucky that I got in touch with Pivot and team at a very right juncture when I really felt like I could share what I know with a larger group. They have a large set of mentors throughout, and you can enroll yourself, and if you're lucky, I will be your mentor.
Absolutely, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much from last 45 to 50 minutes. You shared a lot of things, and definitely it's going to help a lot of people. Now, if you ask you, because based on your experience, based on your work experience, if you want to give upcoming HR or HR community, what are your 3 top pro tips for the people?
One, I would say, don't be scared of data. Don't be scared of Excels. Don't be scared of intelligent analysis that you want to do on data. This is something I've commonly heard. And so please foray and become very strong in data analysis. Second thing I would say is understand the business which you're a part of. Understand the business and the entire value chain of the company that you're a part of.
You mean to say the person going to join that business, or is it like?
HR professionals, as HR professionals, we do cater to the business.
Acha, okay.
So the businesses that we are catered to, develop a strong understanding and a knowledge of the complete value chain of the business that you're supporting. Because you are not just there to support the people. You're of course there to support the people and enable and empower the people that you're supporting. But that also has to add to the business. And which is why it's important that you understand the complete value chain of the business. That's second. And the third thing I would do is, I would recommend, which I was mentioning earlier, is to build that persuasion and consultative ability where you can share your business case, where you can speak about the programs that you want to do, where you can speak about what you want to bring in as a change in the organization effectively. Build that skill flawlessly. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Achala. That it's been a great conversation with you from last, let's say, 1 hour. And thank you so much for taking your time and coming out here and sharing all your experiences, knowledge, and definitely it's going to help a lot of my audience, especially who are into HR upcoming profession. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely having this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for coming out. And it's a sustainable gift for you, made from Rafter brand.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, now.
Thank you.
Here are my 3 takeaway from this episode. The number 1 is curiosity. As she mentioned in L&D, the person who want to upskill himself, he need to be have a curiosity to learn what he's supposed to learn. That going to help him to build his personality, that going to build his profession in particular domain. That's very important to have a curiosity. The second one is clarity. When she's talking about Gen Z, they have compared to other people, they have more clarity in their life. When I started my sales career, I was not know what to do in my life. I do not have that kind of clarity, but Gen Z have that kind of clarity in there. That gives them where they want to achieve in life. That's very important. The third one is fitness goal. It's very important to be as a person, irrespective of any kind of a workload, you have to take up time for workout. Maybe it's walking, maybe it's jogging, maybe playing a football or cricket, or going out hitting a gym for workout. It makes huge difference when you go to the office. because that's give kind of an experience to get more energy in your life. It makes so easy to your job day to day. These are my 3 takeaway from this episode. If you like the episode, please do share with your friends and professional friends and show some love by hitting the subscribe button. See you in the next episode.